I leaned back in my lounge chair, the late afternoon sun heavy and golden across the water of my pool. It was Friday, 6:00 p.m. The kind of silence you only get when you've spent 5 years turning a fixer-upper into a fortress of solitude. My feet were submerged in the cool, filtered blue, and for a moment the world was perfect. Then came the knock. It wasn't a neighborly tap. It was a rhythmic, authoritative pounding that echoed off the stucco. I didn't move at first, I just watched a single leaf drift across the surface of the water. I knew that knock. It had the signature of Karen, the HOA president, a woman who treated our suburban cul-de-sac like a feudal kingdom and herself like the anointed queen. I dried my feet, slid into my flip-flops, and walked to the door. I didn't rush. Rushing gives them the satisfaction of knowing they've disrupted your peace. I opened the door to a tableau of pure entitlement. Karen stood there, clutching a clipboard like a shield, her face set in that permanent expression of smelling something sour. Beside her stood a local police officer, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Parker," the officer began, shifting his weight, "we're here regarding a directive from the Pine Haven HOA." Karen stepped forward, her eyes darting past me into the house, already scouting for violations. "The board has reached a decision, James. Given the recent heat wave and the lack of community amenities, your pool has been designated a shared community resource. You have 48 hours to provide the board with a gate key and a schedule of open hours for the neighbors." I leaned against the doorframe, letting a slow, tired smile creep across my face. I didn't get angry. Anger is a gift you give to people like Karen, and I wasn't feeling generous. "A shared resource," I repeated, my voice flat. "That's a creative way of saying trespassing, Karen. Did you come up with that yourself, or did you find it in a handbook for aspiring dictators?" Her face flushed a deep, mottled red. "The bylaws allow for the reallocation of private assets for the betterment of the community under emergency wellness clauses. We voted. It's official. You comply or we take legal action, and believe me, the HOA has deeper pockets than you do." I looked at the officer. "Officer, are you here to enforce a civil contract dispute based on a delusional interpretation of a landscaping agreement?" The officer sighed. "I'm just here to keep the peace, sir, but if the HOA files a formal complaint regarding denial of community access, it gets messy." "It's going to get very messy," I agreed, looking Karen dead in the eye. "But not for me." She huffed, turning on her heel. "48 hours, James, don't make us come back with a locksmith." I watched them walk away. I didn't close the door until they were back on the sidewalk. I knew Karen. She wasn't just a busybody, she was a predator. She'd spent years manipulating the board, stacking it with her friends, and slowly eroding the privacy of everyone in this neighborhood. But she'd made a mistake. She tried to take the one thing I built with my own hands. The next morning, the harassment began in earnest. It started with a $500 fine taped to my mailbox for unauthorized water usage. By noon, someone had walked across my lawn, leaving deep ruts in the turf. By evening, I caught Karen's husband, a man who had the personality of a wet napkin, filming my backyard from the sidewalk. I didn't yell, I didn't confront them. Instead, I sat in my darkened office and began to dig. If you're going to fight a bureaucracy, you don't use a hammer, you use a scalpel. I spent the weekend pulling every public record, every tax filing, and every HOA financial disclosure from the last 5 years. I'm a patient man and I'm very good with spreadsheets. About 2:00 a.m. on Sunday, I found it. A series of emergency maintenance payments to a landscaping company that didn't exist. The address for the company was a P.O. box registered to Karen's sister. Then I found the pool feasibility study fees, thousands of dollars moved from the community fund into a private account. She wasn't just power hungry, she was a thief. The violation hearing was held on Tuesday night at the community center. Karen had turned it into a trial. The room was packed with neighbors, some curious, some looking for a free swim, and many who looked genuinely afraid to speak up. Karen sat at the head table, flanked by her cronies. She looked like she'd already won. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice echoing through the PA system, "the community is waiting. Are you prepared to sign over the access agreement for the pool, or shall we proceed with the lien on your property?" I stood up, holding a single manila folder. I didn't go to the podium. I stayed right where I was, in the back of the room. "I've listened to your speech about community unity, Karen," I said, my voice calm, projecting just enough to reach the front. "And I've thought about it, I really have, but I keep coming back to the numbers. This isn't a budget meeting, James, she snapped. This is a compliance hearing. Oh, it's definitely a budget meeting, I replied. I started walking down the center aisle, dropping copies of a document onto the laps of neighbors as I passed. Because while you've been telling everyone that my pool is a community resource, I've been wondering why the $40,000 community pool fund, the one we've all been paying into for 3 years, is currently sitting at zero. The room went deathly silent. I saw Karen's hand tremble as she reached for her water glass. I found the emergency payments, Karen, I continued, reaching the front table. I laid a bank statement down in front of her. I found the P.O. box, and I found the $12,000 you spent on administrative travel to a resort in Maui last summer while our street lights were burnt out. That's private board business, she stammered, her face losing its color. You have no right to those records. Actually, as a member of this HOA, I have every right. And so do the 30 neighbors behind me who are currently reading about how you bought your new SUV with their dues. The murmurs in the room turned into a roar. The unified community Karen had built on fear vanished in an instant. People were standing up, demanding answers. The smugness on Karen's face didn't just fade, it shattered. She looked small. She looked like a cornered animal. I leaned over the table, my voice a low, dangerous whisper that only she could hear. The police officer you brought to my house is standing at the back of the room, Karen. I called him an hour ago. I told him I had evidence of felony embezzlement. I think he's here to keep the peace again. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, searching for a way out. She found none. You ruined everything over a pool, she hissed, her voice cracking. I straightened my tie and checked my watch. No, Karen, I didn't ruin anything, I just maintained my property. You were the one who decided to move into mine. I walked out of the community center as the first pair of handcuffs clicked shut behind me. The air outside was cool and crisp. When I got home, the neighborhood was quiet again. I walked into my backyard, the golden glow of the underwater lights shimmering in the dark. I sat down in my lounge chair and dipped my feet back into the water. My sanctuary was still mine, and for the first time in 5 years the HOA was finally silent.